Who was your celebrity crush when you were younger? Leonardo DiCaprio, because I'd watched Titanic and absolutely fell in love with him. Who else? Michael Owen. That was a very short-lived one. Jack Ryder from EastEnders. Absolutely obsessed with him. Thought he was real because I just thought soaps were real back then. Who else? David Beckham. I'm trying to remember all the posters I had on my wall. Oh, okay. One of my biggest crushes, and looking back through all my old diaries was like top of the list always, was Orlando Bloom. I loved him so much because I had been to the cinema to see Lord of the Rings and I'd fallen in love with him as Legolas, and then I fell in love with him in everything else he was in. Also, Ashton Kutcher is another one who I absolutely loved. And that was it, I think. That was most of the people that I fancied. Yeah. I used to list them all in order of top 10 in my diary. Someone has put, do you have a private Instagram, Twitter and Facebook? Do you feel like every time you go on any of the social medias, you are working? Sometimes. Whoa, there's a huge bird outside. That's like prehistoric. Sometimes I do feel like that. It depends what I'm doing, because if I'm just looking at what my friends have been up to, I stop myself and think, you are aimlessly scrolling, you don't need to see what someone had for lunch, and you don't need to see someone moaning about something else. Just text your friend and say, hey, how are you? What have you been up to? In that instance, I do stop myself, because sometimes I think it's very easy to use social media as a way of feeling like you've interacted with someone when you actually haven't. And I discovered this when I had my detox over the new year, because instead of looking at what people were doing on their Instagram story or on Twitter and thinking, oh, I know what they've done now, but that's not you interacting with someone and actually asking them and actually showing that you care about what someone's doing. And I'm a little bit worried that that's the direction social media is going in a sense that people could just sit and watch my video or see me out for breakfast on Insta story and think, oh, well, I don't need to ask her what she's done because I already know. But then that's when you start losing the communication between people. Do you know what I mean? I feel like a granny, like sat here like, it's gonna ruin the communication. But I do think it's very important not to let that appear that that's a way of communicating when it isn't. So whenever I feel like that, I stop myself and I'm like, no, I'm not gonna just scroll through this. I'm gonna actually like send a text to be like, hey, what have you been up to this weekend? Even though I know from their Instagram story sort of what they've been up to. Or I'll like get my phone out and message and be like, hey, I saw that you did this looked really cool. I don't know, I think I'm quite good at keeping them separate, because in my head I'm like, I'm watching this YouTube video because I really enjoy it and I'm doing it in like my spare time. I don't know, at the end of the day, it's a hobby that turned into something, so it will still always be a hobby, but it's also work. And the two are very merged. And also, no, I don't have private accounts. I don't really use my Facebook much anymore, my personal Facebook. And the Twitter I have is my Twitter, and the Instagram I have is my Instagram. I don't really see the point in having a private account because I don't know what I would put on there that I wouldn't put on my normal one. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I know some people who do, and that's fine. I don't think I have time to do both. My boyfriend and I sometimes struggle with trust and jealousy issues. How do you and Alfie do it? We're going to different colleges soon, and I'm worried that distance might make it even harder. Would love any help or advice that you can give. Oh, if any of you guys have any advice for this lovely lady, also leave it in the comments. So before Alfie, I was in a relationship that was so messed up and manipulative, and there was so much jealousy on my part because the other person in the relationship had absolutely no like sense of what a relationship actually was. So my jealousy was validated in that sense, and that relationship was very toxic and really not very healthy at all. So coming out of that relationship, I told myself I would never be with someone who ever made me feel unsure about where they were or what they were doing. Like that horrible sinking feeling where you're like, something's not right. I never wanted that ever again. And luckily when I met Alfie, and even now 5 years later, I have never ever had that feeling. Me and Alfie are very open. Like, I mean, half the time he's somewhere else with people I don't know, and I'm the same, and we have constant streams of communication with whoever on multiple different platforms, and we would never break that trust. Like, trust for me is hugely important, and also the same with Alfie. And so the two of us have never ever had to have a conversation where we've been like, who's that, or what are you doing there, or I feel very jealous of this, or who is this person you're hanging out with. We've just never been that couple, like, ever, which is so refreshing. But I think if you are having those, communication is like the top thing that I could advise you to do. If you are having those like little niggling feelings, you need to make sure that they are justified, and that you're not just feeling them because of your own kind of niggling thoughts. And if you are having those, the only person who can really reassure you is the other person in the relationship. So I do think it's very important to talk about those things, and if they love you and they care about you and they care about your feelings, then they'll listen and they'll reassure you and they'll support you, and hopefully then you kind of learn to build that trust back up a little bit. Also, I think it's fairly normal to feel that when someone's moving away or going off to uni. I remember one of my ex-boyfriends went off to uni, and that was really hard, because up to that point it was kind of all very easygoing, and we had like all the same friends and everything was very settled. And then he went off to uni, and all of a sudden he's making all these new friends who are like tagging him in crazy nights out on Facebook, and I'm back at home like, who's this person? And like, oh, did you have a good night out? I saw you got back at 6 AM. You just have to communicate these things, and it is normal, because if you love someone and care about someone and the last thing you want to do is be hurt, then of course you're going to worry about those things. But if you are both in a really open, honest relationship, then you should just be able to talk to each other about it. Okay, last question. Which is worse, failing or never trying? If there is something you really, really want to do, and there is a reason that you're not doing it, whether that's someone else, a situation, or just your own like self-doubt, I would say I would rather know that I tried and failed than that I had never tried it at all. I think it's a huge part of learning, a huge part of growing, and it's all life experience. I would feel so much better knowing I had given everything my all and I had really tried it, than forever thinking, what if? I really hate the phrase what if, because if I start thinking, oh, what if, then I'm not taking opportunities and making the most of them, and I'm not having enough confidence in myself to follow through with things. And if I start doing that, I have to really stop myself and be like, you should never really ask yourself that question. You should only ever say, okay, that didn't work. How can I move forward from this? And what have I learned from this? And how can I make it better? Or how can I change it? That, I think, is just life and growing. Cheers. Okay, so that is the Q&A, and that is everything I'm going to answer in this video. I really hope you've enjoyed it, and I'm sorry my ramblers were a bit And I'm sorry my questions were a little bit rambly, but you know, I can't just give one-word answers to a Q&A, we all know this. I really hope you guys had a lovely weekend, and that you have a super week ahead of you, and don't forget to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thank you for always doing that, it really means a lot to me. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell if you would like to be notified every time I upload. It's the quickest way of like getting onto one of my videos. And thank you for always leaving such lovely positive comments. I will see you again next week with another video. Bye!